Imagine a criminal organization so powerful that it could influence billion-dollar industries, control labor unions, manipulate businesses, corrupt officials, and generate enormous wealth for decades, all while operating in the shadows. This wasn't a Hollywood movie. It wasn't fiction. It was the real story of New York City's infamous five families. For much of the 20th century, the Genovese, Bonanno, Lucchese, Gambino, and Colombo crime families dominated organized crime in America. Their influence extended far beyond illegal gambling and street-level crime. They infiltrated construction projects, transportation companies, shipping ports, labor unions, and countless legitimate businesses. Through fear, corruption, and strategic planning, they built one of the most powerful criminal empires in American history. But no empire lasts forever. Internal betrayals, government investigations, and new laws would eventually threaten everything they had built. This is the rise and fall of the five families, the birth of the Mafia empire. The story begins in the early 1930s. Before the five families existed, New York's criminal underworld was divided by violent rivalries. Different gangs fought constantly for territory, money, and power. Murders became common, and organized crime was plagued by instability. Among the younger generation of gangsters was Charles Lucky Luciano. Unlike many traditional mafia leaders, Luciano believed endless violence was bad for business. He envisioned a system where major crime groups could cooperate instead of fighting one another. In 1931, after a series of bloody conflicts known as the Castellamarese War, Luciano reorganized organized crime and created a governing body called the Commission. This council acted like a board of directors for the mafia. Disputes could be settled through meetings instead of gunfire, territories could be respected, and profits could continue flowing. The commission established the foundation of the five families, creating a criminal system that would dominate organized crime for decades. The rules that held the mafia together, the five families operated according to strict traditions inherited from Sicilian organized crime. One of the most important rules was Omertà, the Code of Silence. Members were forbidden from cooperating with law enforcement. Informing on fellow members was considered the ultimate betrayal. Violating Omertà often carried severe consequences. The mafia also maintained a clear hierarchy. At the top sat the boss, followed by the underboss, consigliere, captains, and soldiers. This structure allowed leaders to remain insulated from criminal activity while lower-ranking members carried out orders. For decades, this system protected mafia bosses from prosecution and helped the families expand their influence throughout New York and beyond. The rise of the five families, each family developed its own reputation and area of influence. The Genovese family became one of the most powerful organizations in organized crime. Under leaders like Vito Genovese, the family expanded into gambling, labor racketeering, and narcotics trafficking. Their power seemed unstoppable until insiders began revealing secrets to investigators. The Bonanno family, led by Joseph Bonanno, maintained influence for decades. However, internal conflicts and major FBI infiltration operations eventually exposed their activities. The family's reputation for secrecy suffered significant damage. The Lucchese family focused heavily on transportation, trucking, and airport-related operations. Their connections to shipping and logistics generated enormous profits, but high-profile investigations gradually weakened their position. The Gambino family became the most famous of the five families. Under Carlo Gambino, the organization grew into a powerful criminal enterprise. Later, John Gotti became one of the most recognizable mafia bosses in history. His expensive suits, public appearances, and courtroom victories earned him the nickname the Teflon Don. The Colombo family experienced frequent leadership disputes and violent internal conflicts. These power struggles attracted law enforcement's attention and weakened the family's long-term influence. How the Mafia made money. Contrary to popular belief, the Mafia did not build its empire through bank robberies. Instead, it focused on long-term criminal enterprises. Illegal gambling generated millions of dollars. Loan sharking trapped borrowers in cycles of debt. Extortion schemes forced businesses to pay protection money. Labor union infiltration allowed organized crime to influence major industries. Construction projects became particularly profitable. By controlling unions and contractors, Mafia-connected figures could influence who received contracts and how projects were managed. The New York waterfront also became a valuable source of income. Control over docks, shipping operations, and transportation networks created opportunities for corruption and profit. These activities allowed the five families to generate enormous wealth while maintaining influence over legitimate businesses, the beginning of the end. For decades, Mafia leaders appeared untouchable. Their organizational structure protected them from direct involvement in criminal acts. Investigators often struggled to connect bosses to crimes committed by lower-ranking members. Everything changed in 1970 with the introduction of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as RICO. The RICO Act allowed prosecutors to target entire criminal organizations rather than focusing only on individual crimes. Suddenly, years of illegal activity could be used to build cases against powerful Mafia leaders. At the same time, cracks began appearing within the Mafia itself. Members who once swore lifelong loyalty started cooperating with authorities. Faced with long prison sentences, some chose self-preservation over Omertà. One informant after another revealed the inner workings of organized crime. Investigators gained unprecedented insight into Mafia operations, leadership structures, and criminal enterprises. The fall of John Gotti, one of the most dramatic moments in Mafia history, involved John Gotti. By the 1980s, Gotti had become the face of organized crime in America. His confidence and public image made him a media sensation. Many believed he would never be convicted. But federal investigators spent years building their case. Secret recordings, surveillance operations, and insider testimony provided prosecutors with overwhelming evidence. The most damaging testimony came from Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano, one of Gotti's closest associates. When Gravano agreed to cooperate, the Mafia's code of silence suffered one of its greatest defeats. In 1992, John Gotti was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. For many Americans, the conviction symbolized a turning point in the fight against organized crime. Does the Mafia still exist? Although the five families never completely disappeared, they are far less powerful today than during their peak. Modern law enforcement techniques, advanced surveillance technology, financial tracking systems, and continued investigations have made it much harder for organized crime to operate. Some Mafia groups still engage in illegal gambling, fraud, extortion, and other criminal activities. However, their influence over major industries and labor unions has been significantly reduced. The era when the five families could openly dominate parts of the American economy is largely over. Conclusion: the story of the five families is one of power, ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and survival. For decades, they built an empire that reached into nearly every corner of New York City's economy. Through organization, discipline, and intimidation, they became one of the most influential criminal networks in history. Yet their downfall proved a timeless lesson. No matter how powerful an organization becomes, secrecy eventually breaks down, loyalty can fade, fear can lose its grip, and every empire, whether legal or criminal, must eventually face its reckoning. The names Genovese, Bonanno, Lucchese, Gambino, and Colombo remain legendary today. Their story continues to inspire books, movies, documentaries, and endless fascination around the world. But beyond the myths and Hollywood portrayals lies the real history of a criminal empire that rose to extraordinary heights and ultimately discovered that no one is truly untouchable. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more incredible stories from history.